any stat that you go through. And I'm sure it'd be the same thing. Like, oh, he's got great players around him. Well, you tell me a quarterback that's won like this that has around him.
Oh, Nick Sirianni. We welcome you back into the Sports Bash here at 97.3 ESPN. As we said at the end of the first hour there, you have to respect Sirianni and how he just always defends his guys no matter what. And obviously, after a huge NFC Championship game win at home yesterday at Lincoln Financial Field, he's going to stand up for his dude. And his dude is Jalen, amongst the many on the Eagles. Ryan Rothstein, Nick Earnshaw, Pete Giordano, all filling in for Mike Gill. 97.3 ESPN. Keep the text messages coming. 609-403-0973. As we welcome in John McMullen at JF McMullen, Eagles NFL insider, joins the conversation now as we have a lot to get to with all of our guests, as well as John, as we welcome John in to kick off hour number 2. John, welcome in, man. We have a lot to get to. We appreciate your time. As always, let's just kick it off with how we kicked it off and give us John McMullen's key moment / maybe favorite moment from the big win yesterday at the Link.
Well, I thought there were two key moments in the game. One was when Washington kind of begged off on that first drive. It was 18 plays. They had 54 yards. So think about the grind of that. It took 7 minutes. They had 2 fourth-down conversions. And then all of a sudden they lay up on a 4th and 3 from the 16-yard line and say, oh, we'll take the points, which I thought in the moment was a disaster. And it took the Eagles 18 seconds of game time to erase it with a 60-yard Saquon Barkley run on that crack toss play. So I think that deflated the Commanders. I thought it was a big mistake by Dan Quinn to sort of lay up there. And then conversely, it was, if you think about it, it's a 14-12 game late in the first half. The Eagles faced a 4th and 5 from the 45. They could have played it conservatively, punted it, let Braden Mann pin Washington back. Instead, they take a go route to A.J. Brown, 31 yards, and 80 seconds later, the game's over. You had a touchdown, fumble on the kickoff, another touchdown, and that was it for the Eagles. So, I was a little surprised that Washington didn't try to seize the moments because they needed to create some kind of confidence to beat a better team on the road, and they just didn't do it.
There's so many storylines, and I'm sure Nick and PG are going to ask you about so much that we have on the table for you. But I want to ask you about the storylines because there's so many, and we're going to hear about all of them over the coming weeks and today everywhere throughout the Delaware Valley, right? But for you, John McMullen, what's the most intriguing one, right? Because there's the Nick Sirianni aspect, there's the Jalen aspect, there's the Vic Fangio aspect, there's the Saquon aspect, and sort of Howie being in control and, quote, the puppet master of pretty much all of it, right? So for you, John, what's the most captivating aspect of all of that?
Well, I think two bring out more than the others, and that's Saquon's season, which has truly been a historic season, and the fact that, he's going to break the all-time record in the Super Bowl for a single season rushing record that Terrell Davis had in 98, which is ironic because that's the last rushing champion to win a Super Bowl. So Saquon's got a chance to do that. And then Vic is the other one because he turned around what may have been the worst defense in the NFL. That's not hyperbole at the end of last season. And he turned that around to being the best in one. You just never see that. You never see that. I remember talking in the offseason like, well, if Vic can get this to be like a middle-of-the-road defense, I think that was our ceiling. And he turned it around so quickly And I always say, anytime when you have guys with these massive reputations like Saquon and Vic Fangio on and off the field, they never live up to it because people sort of turn them into myths, and it becomes mythology, and they can't live up to it as human beings. These two guys have exceeded it. Saquon exceeded his reputation, and Vic Fangio exceeded his reputation. It happens so rarely, and it's happened, again, once, one on the field, one off the field.
Hey, John, it's Nick. Thanks for joining us today. I want to ask you about the offensive line, the carousel at center yesterday. Before the game, we're getting reports about Cam Jurgens and his back issue. Is he going to be active? He's not going to be active. He ends up being active. Landon Dickerson does get the start, though, at center. And then eventually he gets hurt, too, and Jurgens has to eventually play. What were your takeaways from that whole debacle on the offensive line yesterday?
Well, I don't think it was a debacle. I just think Cam was in a lot of pain, and they were trying to get through the game without using him, had him active and as an emergency sort of usage only, and then Landon gets hurt. And anybody who knows Landon Dickerson, it takes a lot for him to remove him from a game. So, to be honest, at that point, I'm surprised they put Cam in the second half because I think you could have persevered with a Brett Toth or somebody like that. The game was already well in hand. But, you don't want to mess around with anything in the NFC Championship game. But, anytime you have Landon Dickerson out there, I wouldn't, I always joke, obviously Saquon's 99% of the people are going to say is the MVP of this team. But to me, the real MVPs are the offensive line as a group. I think that is where the Eagles' dominance starts. And obviously all of them are part of it. But when they have from left to right, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Mekhi Becton, Lane Johnson, that's where it all starts for this team.
John, talk to me about Kellen Moore's play calling yesterday. He's gotten some criticism in recent weeks during the wild card round and the divisional round. Did you notice if they did anything different? I mean, they obviously passed the ball much better. A.J. Brown was more involved. What did you take away from Kellen Moore's performance calling plays yesterday?
No, I just think they were more successful in the passing game. So if you think about it, I do hear that a lot. But if you understand the NFL and understand NFL teams, you're not rolling out new concepts in game number 20. You're just either executing better or think about the go route to A.J. Brown on that 4th and 5. How many times have you seen the Eagles run that? They've run it very successfully. But I think people, and I've always talked about, people sort of conflate play results with play calls. And when you're successful, you're a good play caller. And when you're not successful, you're a bad play caller. So they were very successful. There were a couple tweaks in the fact that, if you look at those jet sweeps using Dallas Goedert, that's obviously something that's been in the offense. But letting Dallas do it was new, so there's a couple tweaks there. But when you talk about concepts, you don't introduce new concepts in game number 20, especially in the NFC Championship.
John, it's Pete G. Talk to me, Rothstein mentioned this earlier, but talk to me about Howie Roseman and his career arc with this organization. He's been here over 25 years. The draft picks, obviously more good than bad. But talk to the listeners about Howie Roseman and the construction of this football team. More recently, obviously, with the guys up front, with the Georgia guys on defense, and what he did to the secondary with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, Howie's great. Anybody who's listened to me over the years, I've been calling him a top 5 GM for a long, long time before a lot of people, gave him that credit. But it was a great offseason from the standpoint of the draft picks and obviously Saquon hit. If you think about Zach Bond on the defensive side. But if you want to be honest, he certainly didn't sign Zach Bond to be an all-ball linebacker. He brought him in to be a backup edge rusher and a special teams player. So, that's one where Vic got a look at him and said, man, you know what? I think he can play off-ball linebacker. And all of a sudden it turns into a home run. So there's some, there's always with GMs, there's good and bad. If you've been around for as long as Howie has, you're going to have some bad draft picks. But overall, his record is beyond reproach. And if you look at one of the big advantages the Eagles have over other organizations, Jeffrey Lurie has given Howie Roseman the rope to make those mistakes. So if you think about just the coaches and how many coaches he's been able to hire, most GMs don't get to do that. So part of it is just the continuity and sticking with it, which a lot of other organizations can't do. But there's no doubt that Howie's very good at his job.
And on Brandon Graham, there was a report that he may come off injured reserve as soon as today. He tore his triceps late in the season. We didn't expect him to return. He kind of planted the seed that maybe I'll be back for the Super Bowl if we made it that far. Well, guess what? They made it that far. I don't know how effective he'll be in 2 weeks. It could be his final game, and we all know what happened last time BG played in a Super Bowl. Actually, 2 Super Bowls ago, I should say. But Brandon Graham and the possibility that he may come off IR.
Yeah, I know Brandon wants to try to play, and I talked to him last night. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Eagles, they're not going to take him off IR. What they would do is start his practice window.
Okay.
And then you have 21 days, so obviously the Super Bowl would be in that. So, but really it's up to the doctors. So I know, Brandon Graham wants to push and certainly wants to potentially end his career by playing in the Super Bowl, even if it's 4 or 5 snaps. And, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if the Eagles started that practice window to see, where he is. But ultimately it'll be up to the doctors. And, if they say he's ready to go, yeah, he's ready to go. But that's a very difficult injury to make it back. It needs a certain amount of time to heal torn triceps. So that's kind of out of Brandon's hands. But he certainly feels good. That's an injury that maybe you feel good just walking around, but then when you start pushing against 300-pound offensive linemen, you could do some damage. So we'll see. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if they start that 21-day practice window because it doesn't hurt. You can be on the practice field, try to do some things. And if he's ready to go, you can activate him. If he's not, you just hopefully you win the Super Bowl and BG's a part of it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't expect him to take many snaps away from the guys on this defensive line, most notably Nolan Smith. Talk to us about Nolan Smith and the job that he's done late in the season because he did kind of get off to a slow start, but in this postseason, man, he has been getting to that quarterback.
Yeah, he's had, he's Eagles' all-time record for sacks in the postseason. That's pretty amazing if you think about it from that perspective. It's Nolan Smith. So he's been tremendous. One of the stories of the season, because there was a lot of concern before Brandon got injured, he wasn't playing a whole heck of a lot. There wasn't a lot of production in the snaps he wasn't playing. So if you go back to that moment and say, boy, he's going to be that other guy next to Josh Sweat because Bryce Huff gets hurt. He's not being impactful as well, and all of a sudden it looks like a big problem. People were talking about, do you have to go outside the organization at the trade deadline to make a move? And the Eagles said, we're going to give Nolan a chance, and he has hit a home run. I mean, he is not only producing, but he's playing a ton of snaps, which has enabled them to go with a three-man rotation in the playoffs with Alex Hunt and Josh Sweat. and that's something they haven't done really in the past. They like to have a four-man rotation, but Nolan's so young, he's so athletic, he's so conditioned. He can go that many snaps, and he's been very effective. He's been one of the stories of the second half of the season for the Eagles.
John McMullen joining us here, helping us break it all down after the Eagles punched their ticket to Super Bowl 59 yesterday at the Link. Feels good. Johnny Max, host of Birds 365 at JF McMullen. You look at this team and you look at everything that they've, I don't want to say overcome, because I would say overall it's been smooth sailing, although we always find stuff to overreact about. I am certainly guilty of that, John. But I compare Jalen Hurts to Kobe Bryant a little bit, just in his demeanor, right? Like, I mean, the dude, he's just won me over, and especially after this game yesterday. Just talk about his leadership and his ability to be stoic, and you can't tell if they win or lose and how big of a game he just played when he's walking off that field, man. I give the guy so much credit.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been even-keeled. So, I mean, that's one of the things when things go well, people like, and when things don't go well, they don't like. It's one of those things. But for the most part, they just won. I mean, if you think about this Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts era, I mean, Nick Sirianni's the first coach in the Super Bowl era to go to 4 postseasons, 4 for 4, different kind of 4 for 4 in Philadelphia, 4 for 4 in the postseason, and reach 2 Super Bowls. Nobody else has done it. And the starting quarterback in that entire time, obviously, has been Jalen Hurts. So if Kansas City didn't exist, and they do, this would be the winningest team over that time frame. And this is, you know, this is the best era of Eagles football. Certainly in the Super Bowl era, you maybe can go back to 1949 and 1950, but most people aren't going to go back that far. So people should enjoy the journey. This has been a tremendous run. Unbelievable team, and it's been that way for a long stretch of time. It's not always like this. I feel like there's a generation of Eagles fans that don't realize that it's not always like this.
They're spoiled. They're spoiled, John.
A little bit. I would always talk about the Packers fans like that. They had like a quarter century of Hall of Fame quarterback play, uninterrupted, and they got very spoiled and entitled. I do feel a little bit of that in Philadelphia. I do feel there's a little spoiled.
Hey, it's a good problem, and I'm fine with being the old man yelling at cloud. You know, saying, you don't understand. We used to walk to school in the snow. But a good new problem here in Philly. John, we appreciate your time and insight as always. John McMullen at JF McMullen, NFL Eagles insider, host of Birds 365. We appreciate you, J-Mac.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.